It's kind of strange. We live in an age with infinite information, where every single past mistake is meticulously documented, and yet we seem absolutely doomed to repeat the same financial catastrophes over and over and over again. It's a profound paradox, really, and it suggests the problem isn't a lack of data, but something far deeper, something within the system itself, and maybe within us.
So you have to ask, why does this cycle of boom, bust, and then bailout just keep happening? Well, the answer, it turns out, isn't about finding a better algorithm or a smarter regulator. It's about realizing that our whole metaphor for how the market works is just wrong.
For decades, we've pictured the market as a kind of machine. Yeah, a complex one, but ultimately a predictable set of gears and levers. But that metaphor, it's failing us. So what if the market isn't a machine at all? What if it's something alive, something chaotic, constantly evolving, like a complex biological ecosystem?
Okay, let's dive into this big idea. It's called the adaptive market hypothesis. And what it does is completely reimagine finance, but through the lens of evolutionary biology. So in this view, trading strategies aren't just formulas, they're more like species. They compete for capital, they adapt to changing conditions, and the ones that just can't evolve, well, they go extinct. This isn't some world of perfect rationality. This is pure survival of the fittest. And this just brilliantly illustrates that shift in thinking. The old view, right, it saw the market as a machine in perfect balance, populated by these perfectly rational actors. The new, adaptive view sees a biological system, one driven by agents who make mistakes, who learn, and who are fundamentally shaped by these intense evolutionary pressures. This isn't just a new theory, it's a completely new lens for understanding why we do what we do with our money. So, okay, if the market really is an ecosystem, how on earth does it forget? I mean, a forest doesn't forget a fire. You can see the scars for centuries. But in finance, the memory of a total catastrophe just seems to vanish. Let's really dissect the anatomy of this amnesia. It all starts with our own biological hardware. Our brains evolved over hundreds of thousands of years to handle immediate physical threats, like a predator on the savannah. But when we're faced with the abstract threat of a market crash, that exact same ancient fight-or-flight reflex kicks in. It's a system designed for survival, but in the world of finance, it just triggers panic selling and irrational herd behavior. It's a violent collision between our primitive wiring and these high-speed modern markets. And then you've got the system's software. You've got generational turnover, where a whole new group of traders enters the market without the scars of the last crisis. But it's actually more than that. The institutions themselves practice something called managed unlearning. In the relentless hunt for profit, they actively dismantle the very crisis-era rules that were designed to protect them, convincing themselves those rules are now obsolete, completely forgetting the brutal lessons that created them in the first place. And this is really where it all comes together. Just look at how the behavioral flaws feed directly into the structural ones. That personal genius belief of a new generation of traders, it creates immense pressure on institutions to engage in that managed unlearning and shed all the old risk controls. You see? One fuels the other, and it creates this powerful, self-reinforcing cycle of forgetting. But here is where the story takes a really fascinating turn. What if this tendency to forget isn't just a bug in the system? What if, in some strange and dangerous way, it's also a crucial feature? I mean, think about it. An ecosystem that remembered every single failure would be paralyzed by fear. Nobody would fund the next audacious startup. No one would take a risk. Forgetting is what allows the system to engage in what we call creative destruction, to let old industries die and then reallocate their capital to new, groundbreaking ideas. In a way, amnesia is the lifeblood of progress. But this necessity comes at a terrible price. This timeline shows that vicious cycle in action. The exact same mechanism, using high-leverage short-term debt to fund long-term assets, caused the collapse of the Granite Fund, then long-term capital management just 4 years later, and then Bear Stearns less than a decade after that. The market forgets just long enough to repeat the same fatal mistake. And this is not a new thing. As this quote makes crystal clear, this pattern has been repeating itself for over 200 years. It's a deep, structural, and fatal flaw in our collective financial mind. And that brings us right to the heart of the paradox.
This slide just crystallizes that paradox perfectly. The very same force that fuels our economic engine, that amnesia that drives innovation, is also the fatal vulnerability that guarantees crises. It's what allows institutions to privatize these immense gains and then socialize their catastrophic losses onto the public. We need it to grow, but it also ensures our periodic self-destruction.
So, if individual and institutional memory are both pretty much destined to fail, are we just doomed to repeat this cycle forever? Or can we find a way out of the paradox? Can we design a system that actually remembers for us, embedding the wisdom of past crises directly into its architecture?
This leads to 4 potential strategies. First, we codify learning into what's called structural memory. These are automatic regulations that, for example, increase capital requirements during a boom and then loosen them in a bust. It's basically like acting as a brake when we're most likely to forget caution. Second, mandate crisis recurrence drills to transfer the visceral feeling of a crisis to a new generation. Third, deploy technology. Digital biomarkers that can monitor trading patterns for those telltale signs of herd behavior or just out-of-character risk-taking. And finally, reform how we train experts, not just to build better AI, but to cultivate the deep intuition that's needed to question and even override it.
And that leaves us with this final, really profound question. We are grappling with a problem that is deeply, evolutionarily human. If our own minds are wired to forget, if our institutions are designed to unlearn, and if our progress actually depends on a degree of amnesia, can we ever truly engineer a system that is resilient enough and wise enough to protect us from our own nature?